The talk is aimed, basically it was on a handshake agreement. We've got a lot of help from Global and Prominent, and now the work has been refereed. We accept that it's technically good. It was refereed in Oxford and Sydney, and it was recommended for a Dean's commendation, so we're quite confident about the work. But the reason we wanted to come today was to come say thank you for your help, but also to bring some very, very good news, I think. So the talk is honed at how you might see things. It's not really an academic presentation at all. So with that, I propose that we make a start, but doesn't want to start. Sorry.
Sorry.
Okay, so we need just to go back to. I have to put it up again.
Don't you just love technology?
Yeah, there we go. We need to put. Oh, it undid the projection.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so we need to hit that one here. If we can get it to project.
Yep.
That's it? Okay, perfect. So the talk is simply, the emphasis is on results from controlled dosing of hydrogen peroxide as a benign biocide. This work becomes very important. And tomorrow, Priyantha will get his PhD conferred at the university, so we can honour him in a small way here. All right. So the problem is in RAS farming, often you get cyanobacteria and other things, and they produce metabolites. Two of these are problem. They're geosmin and MIB, and they accumulate in the water, and then they eventually make their way into the fish flesh. And that gives quite an unsatisfactory taste, and you end up losing the sale of the fish as a premium protein. So the current practice for taint control is purging, so you just have some clean water, and you don't feed the fish. So the problem is, of course, you're going to end up with a loss of mass and some revenue and some time wasted. You can use chemical things like copper sulfate. Long term, of course, they're toxic, and there are other approaches as well. So by way of background, you can grow a lot of other things other than barramundi, but we work with barramundi because it was available. So I'm going to introduce the talk, then I'm going to ask Priyantha to present some of the quite detailed work, and then I'll summarise with one slide the conclusions, and then we'll take some questions if you like. So hydrogen peroxide, the idea came to me, if you like. I did my postdoc up in Brisbane with CSIRO, and 100 years ago they were milking cows on the Atherton tableland, which is pretty hot. And so I was very interested to know how they got the milk down into the cities without refrigeration. So well over 100 years ago, they were permitted to add hydrogen peroxide to the milk. The only byproduct is oxygen and water, so therefore it's perfectly safe. And this morning you probably exposed yourself a couple of times to hydrogen peroxide if you cleaned your teeth, dyed your hair, cleaned the bathroom, toilet, whatever. So it's quite a safe thing. So it's no chlorine, it's just hydrogen peroxide. It looks a bit like that. 2 oxygen and hydrogen. It fits in water very easily. It's quite colourless. For those who'd be interested, it has a molecular weight of 34 and a low density. And we've been buying it from Interox as 50% weight per weight. Now it destroys, this is not a good academic word, it inactivates cyanobacteria, and that inhibits the way they produce these metabolites, which end up giving the bad taste. It also generates some other reactive species as well, and they go on to do some good things in the water. So what we needed after the idea was to deliver the hydrogen peroxide. We had absolutely no idea of what concentrations and so forth. And Tim and Jerry have mentioned how we approached them. And unusually, actually, for industry, they were extremely positive. And they came to the university, we gave a talk, and the whole thing took off from there as really a gentleman's agreement. For Priyantha to get going, you may know we needed Animal Ethics Committee science approval. South Australia is the only state in our Commonwealth where fish are animals. So in every other state, they're non-animals. That actually worked to our advantage, which I'm happy to talk about later actually. So he did a 3 months course, sat for an exam, had to get 80% pass to learn how to kill fish. Can I tell people you're theravivalists, and we weren't allowed to actually slit the throat of the fish, so we had to find a way around that, and we put them in ice water. So that solved everybody's problem. Also, we had to get approval from another group. So about the first 6 or 8 months, apart from writing some papers, we're getting lots of approval. Why do we need approval for hydrogen peroxide? Because it's quite a strong oxidant. If you want to dye your jeans, just 1 or 2 drops of 6% to take the colour out of the jeans. It's 50% commercial grade, so that's quite a powerful oxidant. The major components of the equipment that we got, and we were quite thrilled that Prominent through Tim really we're happy to give this a go. So this is the actual equipment we used, and we had the sensor, and at this stage no idea of the concentrations that we should use. We needed a display, and we needed a pump that was reliable to do the work. So at this point I'm going to ask Pranta to present the data from the preliminary trials, and then the commercial scale trials, and then I'll summarise everything as promised in 1 slide, and then take some questions. Right. So the intention is not to present a lot of discussion about the data, but just to show you what we got. But you can raise questions as we go, as you like. But it's just to show you the kind of things we were looking at to prove things as we moved along. So if you want to do the rest of that, Pranta, then you can.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kane. Okay, let's get started with the experimental studies. We did the preliminary studies at Southern Barramundi Farm, Clarendon. So we thank Steve, and we are glad to have him here today. First of all, actually, we had to, so we checked the growth water tank. So water, for presence of geosmin and MIB. Yes, we found there's a high level of geosmin and MIB in their production tank water. So then, so we developed this type of pilot scale experimental setup. So you can see these are biological filters, mechanical filters, and like this. And so we use this nursery tank to set up the pilot scale RAS system. So one tank is around 2,500 liters. So we use 2 tanks, and one was used to control dose the hydrogen peroxide, and other one was not dosed. It was the control tank. So we fill up both tanks with commercial scale growth water, and we put 20 fish each tank for each tank, and they were around 180 years old. So 180 days old one. Approximately weight was around 400 grams. So then we started dosing hydrogen peroxide, because initially we started working with 5 milligram per liter. We did some water sampling around 35 days. We carried out experiment 35 days, and we did the water sampling twice per week. At the end of the experimental periods, and we sampled 2 sets of fish from both tanks, and one is for the fish flesh analysis for flavor compounds, and other one is for the veterinary testing. Okay, this slide shows some photograph of hydrogen peroxide dosing. So this one, the left-hand one, shows the hydrogen peroxide concentration in the growth water, because we were aiming to control maintaining 5 milligram per liter in the growth water. And this photograph showing the filters we use, biological and mechanical filters. So this, the right-hand side, the top of the photograph shows how we connected hydrogen peroxide containers to the hydrogen peroxide dosing apparatus. So we had to use the pump to pump growth water to the hydrogen peroxide, dosing apparatus. Okay, these are the summary of results. This graph shows the variation of GSM with the time, and this graph shows the variation of MIB with the time. So T0 is the control tank, T1 is the treated tank. So you can see clear difference between the control tank and treated tank. And most importantly, you can see this the GSM concentration of T1 treated tank was always below the limiting concentration. So we could see the same scenario for MIB as well. Okay, so then we analyze the fish flesh for GSM in MIB. So this photograph shows how we did the analysis. We made a composite sample of, we made a front, dorsal, lateral, and belly tissues, and we made a composite sample. So the next one is actually just to show and how we prepare the sample. So this photograph shows the microwave digestion units we used to extract the test and chemical. So we analyzed this is the results of geosmin and MIB analysis. So this is the control tank, this is the treated tank. So you can see the significant difference between control tank and the treated tank. It clearly shows the effectiveness of hydrogen peroxide using controlling geosmin and MIB. So importantly, this is the consumer rejection threshold. So fish which is above this level is normally not sellable. Okay, we carried out some water quality analysis, and we analyzed ammonia, nitrate, phosphorus, and alkalinity. Particularly, we wanted to make sure whether these both tanks have enough nutrient for the optimum growth of microorganisms. Yes, we found, because we couldn't see much difference between the control tank and treated tank. So another criteria we were interested in the ammonia, and we found a little bit ammonia development with the time in both tanks, but they were not much significant. Okay, this slide shows you how fish looks like. Actually, they look healthy, and we couldn't find a significant difference of these two fishes. This one is from the control tank, and other one is from the treated tank. And especially, we got this fish analyzed from the veterinary doctor. Especially, actually, they check the gills, because whether hydrogen peroxide makes an impact on fish gills. Actually, we couldn't find any significant difference of the fish gills of two fish. Okay, this slide shows some other benefits of adding hydrogen peroxide. So left side one, you can see the dissolved oxygen in the growth water and the pH level. So the T0 is the control tank, T1 is the treated tank. So if you look at the treated tank, and actually after hydrogen peroxide addition, the dissolved oxygen went up with the time, and then with the time again it's a little bit level off, again decreasing. But end of the experimental period, you can see the clear difference between the dissolved oxygen of the two tanks, and with the dissolved oxygen concentration treated tank always above the greater than the control tank. This is one of the addition of adding hydrogen peroxide. And the pH is another critical criteria, because we wanted to make sure that when hydrogen peroxide is added to the water, whether it is make significant impact to the pH of the system. But we couldn't see any difference of the pH in the two systems actually. So the right hand side is the particle size distribution graph. We took two water sample at the end of the experimental period, and the blue bar shows the control tank, and the yellow bar shows the treated tank. We can see the clear difference of the particle size distribution. The advantage of here is when we have the small particle, it is easy digestible. Okay. So now we got the promised result with the 5 mg of hydrogen peroxide. So then we wanted to make sure which concentration is more suitable for the commercial application. So then we did another 2 sets of experiment with 2.5 milligram of hydrogen peroxide and 10 milligram per liter hydrogen peroxide. You can see that this is the 5 milligram one, this is the 2.5, this is for the 10 milligram per liter. So these are the results for the GSM, this for the MIB. So here in this graph you can see the control tank, all 3 control tanks always had a higher GSM, and in contrast in the treated tank the GSM level were very low. Actually they were below the limiting, almost below the limiting concentration. So then actually this results clearly shows that the 3 low concentrations we used really work against the geosmin and MIB. And other important thing is actually, so we tried 3 concentration, but the 2.5 milligram per liter actually more than sufficient enough to control geosmin and MIB. That is the key finding we got from this type of analysis. So we found the same scenario for MIB as well. Okay, so then we analyzed the fish flesh for geosmin and MIB. So these are the control one for 2.5, 5, and 10. And you can see in the control tank always reported the higher GSM because they were above the consumer rejection threshold concentration. Actually, this is the established value because we got it from the literature. So this graph clearly shows because the 2.5 milligram per liter hydrogen peroxide is highly effective, but it's more than enough. So because this results comparable with the growth water analysis. Okay, now we got the good result, promising result with the pilot scale study. Now we wanted to carry out continue this with the pilot scale study, sorry, commercial scale study. So we carried out this commercial scale study at Barafish Gola, and we must thank them for giving for providing their fish facilities to us to undertake this experiment. So this is how their tank arrangement. They have a 4 large tank, and each capacity 120,000 liters. So one tank is divided into four sections for the practical purposes. They label as a A, B, C, and a D. And so we choose two tanks, and this one 2B for the treating with hydrogen peroxide, and the 4D as the control. And we started with the fingerlings, and we put almost 3,000 fingerlings into one tank. And then we started doing the both control and treated tank at the same time. So we started with the direct dosing. Okay, so these are the result of the direct dosing. Okay, so unfortunately, around 3rd week, actually we started seeing, we noticed some high mortality rates, and as soon as we noticed, we stopped dosing. So then we let the system establish and the recovery, and with the time you can see this number went down. So actually we found, and why this happened, why it happened, and we noticed actually what happened was all the fingerlings started coming to nearest to the hydrogen peroxide. They got burned themselves, and the fish died actually just because of the secondary infection. Actually, because we found some sores in their skin, and the bacteria infected, and fish died. So then actually we realized that the direct dosing was not going to work. Now we have to think about different way of safe delivery. So then. Okay, so then actually we came up with the dosing case. You can see how this is the dosing tip, and we avoid the fish moving towards to the hydrogen peroxide. But this system actually worked well. We didn't see any unusual fish mortalities. But the problem is actually we had some practical difficulties, like because this is a cage and it's a mesh, because all the organic matter in the system started accumulated in the cage. And the other thing is, because this is it affects for the water circulation of the tank. So then actually we realized or this is also not going to work. So then we have to think about another way of doing it. Okay, so then finally we came up with this solution, and so this is the mixing tank. So in this schematic diagram you can see how it works. This is the, I'm sorry, this is not in a scale, but just to show you and how it works. And this is the commercial, the production tank, and this is the mixing tank. This is the dosing apparatus. So we use the pump to dose the pump growth water to the mixing tank, and then we dose hydrogen peroxide to the mixing tank. So then it was the treated water was released back to the growth tank. But this system worked really well, but we didn't notice any higher mortality. This is how the instrument we set up in for the farm. It has the wheel, and this one also. This is the mixing tank, and it also has the wheel, because the advantage actually. So you can move all the system wherever you want in the tank. Okay, so in this diagram you can see how we release the treated water back to the growth tank. And here we can see the submersible, the pump. Actually, we use that one to pump growth water to the mixing tank. So this photo is the closer look at the mixing tank. Okay, results. So this is how the GSM varies in the growth water with the time. Actually, we did the experiment over 35 weeks actually, because we starting from the fingerlings and ended up with the harvested type the fish. But we couldn't see much difference between the control tank and the treated tank. You can see the treated tank in the blue color and the control tank in the yellow color. Okay, so this for the MIB, the result of MIB, so again treated tank and control tank, but we couldn't get the much, the significant difference between the treated and control tank. Okay, so this slide shows and fish growth with the time. You can see both the control tank, so the treated tank and control tank, both fish had the exponential growth pattern. Because we couldn't see any adverse effect on fish due to hydrogen peroxide. Yeah, okay. This slide and further highlight, because this shows the fish mass gain with the time, and you can see the time different time interval. This is the mass gain by the fish with the time. So if you look at these two columns, because they are much more similar, and we couldn't see any difference actually. So these two slides actually clearly indicate, but there wasn't any significant impact of hydrogen peroxide on the fish growth. Okay, so I will hand over to Dr. Kane to talk about the transcription science.
Right, thanks. So what's the take-home message? There are three areas and three take-home messages. When I put the slide up about all the licenses we had to get to do the work, I forgot to mention one other. Prantha went to Canada for 6 weeks or so to learn all the technical analyses. So the world experts on analysing these chemicals are French Canadians, and so he spent time there, and we got some money for him to do that. So he brought all that expertise back as well. So the take-home message. Because there was no damage to the fish bloom, that is, we couldn't identify a fish that had been in the treated tank with hydrogen peroxide, because the fish mass was not statistically any different with time, and the mortalities, once we overcame the problem of mixing, were more or less exactly the same. A pretty safe conclusion, therefore, is that hydrogen peroxide is indeed a benign biocide in RAS. Now, we haven't actually published that yet, so we're working on that paper. So that was very nice to know. In fact, there was one advantage apart from increased, there were a few other advantages. In fact, Steve might have pointed these out because we did the preliminary work at his farm at Clarendon. There are benefits little bit of extra oxygen, and there are other little benefits as well. In fact, the other one is the fish look a little bit better, a little bit whiter. Now, I'm not in the business of selling fish, so I take Steve's word for that. Let's just go down here, and I'll come back here. The dosing apparatus, given that none of us knew anything about what we were getting into at the time, it worked extremely well. So, Tim's already pointed out we could fine-tune some of that a bit more. We opted for the 2.5. We're strictly SI. We don't talk ppms. Maybe you could go even lower and still get the same results. There seems to be no advantage now because it is clearly a benign biocide. There's no advantage in higher. So we want to work around about the 2.5 milligram per litre. So that's at the limit, more or less, of the current probe. But nevertheless, it worked extremely well. So this apparatus, which in my mind would consist of the dedicated probe, the pump and dosing, and now what we're going to need is a third element, and I'll come to that. Okay, we conclude that this meets the current probe meets needs, but it could of course be refined a little bit, and we'd look to Prominent to do that. In my mind, I can see this. I'm not in business, I'm not a salesman, but I do have quite a number of papers. And my view is that these three elements could be put together in scale, and you buy them off the shelf on a trolley, and you wheel them along to some above ground RAS tanks. And that's it. That's how you sell it. It has very wide application. So we've worked exclusively with barramundi. Each experiment's a minimum of 35 weeks, so it gives you some idea of the scale and cost. So they're all the very, very good news. The good news was it worked very well in the preliminary studies. They're quite small, 2,500 litres. When we went to the commercial scale, it didn't work as well. So we've got a 50-fold increase in the volume. So that's 1.5 orders of magnitude. So, speaking as a biochemical engineer now, the problem became clear that we could not replicate the mixing on the large scale that we could get in the smaller tanks. So the amount of shear and movement, and if you're familiar with things like Reynolds number and things, the Reynolds numbers in the preliminary tanks were clearly what was needed, so we can estimate those. And we couldn't quite get them in the 120,000 litre tank. And that was the conclusion. So out of all of this work, the one thing that is needed to do is to do some commercial scale study and look at micro mixing. Now we actually have a lot of ideas about how to do that. So if you wanted to ask about that, I'm happy to talk about that. So overall, very good news. We're happy to take some questions.
Does anyone bring their hand up to do more work with this?
Yes, in fact, I have a proposal, if you're interested, that will cost you nothing to do. So I think it's very exciting, actually.
Yeah, I did see in the preliminary stuff that we did Kangaroo, there's a lot of benefits apart from the mud flavors and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think it's got a lot of potential.
So none of us foresaw the fish swimming into hydrogen peroxide. I don't know what they find there, but it damaged their gills, and we got some experts to have a look at the fish, and then step by step we showed. So that this standalone equipment, if the two companies wanted to get together, would consist of the probe, the dosing, pumping, and a mixing tank, the design of which we haven't quite concluded. And that will depend on the scale up. 50 to 100-fold is a significant scale up. And it's the mixing that the fish see, the micro mixing. But there are techniques, but a lot of experimental work to prove that.
Depends on the RAS system set up as to how you put it in. But yeah.
But there are simple things, like you just get some underwater jet pumps and create mixing. But we don't know what Reynolds numbers we need, and therefore what pumping costs, and so we can't actually do that just yet. But clearly, if we can replicate exactly what happened in your preliminary tanks, then we'll get some fantastic results.
Yeah.
Now, can I say you're thinking of working with crustaceans and things?
I haven't even thought about crustaceans.
So the idea is in my mind, I just wheel this trolley up, get a tank, and off you go. I don't know what these probes cost, do you know, these sensors?
Well, the sensors themselves are